PMS, pregnancy, menopause. Being a woman is a lot. Ollie supports you and yours with expert solutions for every age and life stage. They just launched 2 new products exclusively at Walmart. Period Hero combats bloat, mood swings, and more during PMS. And Balance Perimeno to support hormonal balance, mood, and metabolism during perimenopause. Grab yours at Ollie.com.
Ollie!
These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
The Dick Morris Show. Entertaining and informative. On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Morris and Doug DePiro Show.
Hello, Dick Morris.
Sponsored by the Patriot Gold Group. This song is dedicated to Donald Trump, a very funny guy and very zany. And he was married to a woman for 30 years and then got divorced. And in the divorce settlement, he gave her all of his money. And,
this is a great story.
And then he, after about 4 or 5 years of being single, he fell in love with her again, and he married the same woman. And I said, Raymond, of course, you've always wanted to marry a rich woman.
I think that's hilarious. Hey, listen, just real quick, the call number is 1-800-848-9222. Call in, 1-800-848-9222. That's a funny story.
Trump got it right this time, the second time around. In 2017, when he first took office, he faced a key choice, which is what he would do first. We focus first on changing and reforming and repealing Obamacare, or would he focus on his tax cut? And he made a decision to go with the tax cut. I'm sorry, to go with Obamacare.
Yeah.
And my friend John McLaughlin recalls bitterly the meetings in the White House where he said we should go with the tax cut because if we don't do the tax cut early, right away, it won't take effect before the midterm elections. And if you want a good economy when the elections of 2018 come around, you better pass a tax cut now. But they didn't listen to him. They were so focused on the Republican agenda of repealing or changing Obamacare that Trump decided that would be his main priority. And he didn't get around to passing the tax cut until December of 2017, very late, like December 20th, I think. And the result was, as McLaughlin had predicted, the economy did not really move until June or July or April, August of 2016, and too late to really affect the midterm elections. And Trump got walloped in those elections. The Democrats gained 40 seats in the House. And
you think it would have been a big difference if we went the other direction with the taxes?
A huge difference. And Trump learned this lesson and was really underscoring his strong effort to get the big, beautiful bill passed now.
Good.
And to get it done by Memorial Day in the House and by July 4th in the Senate. And it looks like he's on target, looks like he's on track, and looks like he's going to be able to do it. And that really means that most likely we will win the by-election of 2026.
That's good to know.
Normally you lose. Normally the opposition party always gains seats. In fact, only twice in the last 100 years has the opposition party not gained seats.
Your boy.
Yeah, one was Bill Clinton, and the other was no, I'm sorry, that wasn't true. The Republicans took over Congress, his first by-election. The first time it happened was 2002, right after 9/11.
Oh, right.
Bush and the
right.
Republicans gained seats, even though they should have lost them. And and the other time was I'm forgetting when, but the other time was there was a second example of this. But now it looks like Trump has skipped it. He skipped the bullet, and
literally right in his ear.
Oh yeah, right. Sorry, and he survived this, and the fact that he passed this tax cut in the House, which is the key thing, and now he'll almost undoubtedly get it in the Senate. It really means that we're going to win the next by-election. We're not going to lose control of Congress in 26. It's too early to really tell that definitely, and you need to see how the races shape up individually. But we're at least guaranteed, I believe, that we'll have a roaring good economy going on when we go into that election. And it'll kick in early enough that people will get the point. See, it has to kick in early enough so that businesses can plan for it and can expand and move up, realizing that they're going to have this tax cut.
And then people could feel the effect once
and
the
then
business.
It takes a while, right,
sure,
for people to actually feel it.
So you're saying
now?
You're saying pretty much now this has to happen,
and that's why it's great that it's happening now.
Good.
One of the big items in the tax cut is renewing the 2017 deductions for business. The most important of these is their ability to expense 100% of their new plant and equipment investment right away. Normally, you have to wait the period of depreciation for you to deduct it on your taxes piece by piece. But under the 2017 reform, if you build a plant or you buy a store, you can deduct its depreciation right away, and that encourages businesses to invest and to expand, and they'll really get it right. So that's a very, very big development. Now, of course, the other question is, what do we do next? What's next? In the maneuvering over the big, beautiful bill, Trump Tax Cut 3, Trump Tax Cut, three prominent sources of revenue were left on the table and remain to be used, and may turn out to be that the big, beautiful bill Part 2, I call that BBB 2.0, can use these revenues because they're available to Trump. First, none of the close to $1 trillion in revenue expected from the tariff increases Trump is pushing made it into the BBB. The tax cuts in the bill were entirely funded by conventional revenues, albeit with optimistic but really realistic expectations of increased revenues due to economic growth. Secondly, Trump instructed his Interior Department to go ahead with massive sales of federal land, largely in Utah and Nevada, and these revenues were not included in the BBB. And thirdly, Trump made this bold order, which is he told Medicare and Medicaid to tell the drug companies that we would not buy drugs and medicines for a higher price than the best price they sell around the world. So if they tell the EU that a given medication is going to be $100, you can't turn around and charge the American taxpayers $150. You have to limit yourself based on what you charge the rest of the world.
He's reversing his competition idea, competition in business, you know?
How?
Well, in competition, capital competition, you, like when he was talking about insurances, you go across state, you get the best price. He's doing the opposite right now by getting...
Well, the taxpayers getting the best price.
Right.
The drug companies, you're right, you're getting the worst price.
Right, good.
And because of the arcane way that the Congressional Budget Office scores expected new revenues in the budget bill, which is something like the Stone Age man chiseling it on a clay tablet, the Congressional Budget Office scores these bills, and these three sources of revenue enhancement and spending reduction were not used and remain on the table and could potentially be used to finance BBB 2.0. April 5th, 2025, Trump invoked his authority under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, the IEPA, to address the national emergency posed by large and persistent trade deficits. And he announced he was imposing a 10% tariff on all imports into the United States. And the U.S. imports about $40 billion a month. So the order will likely...
Wait, $40 billion a month?
Yeah.
Wow.
Right. And the order will likely generate over $400 billion in federal revenues annually.
Wow.
Excuse me, I'm wrong on that. The U.S. imports do it annually, $3.5 trillion a year.
Wow.
So over the course of a year, the 10% tariff would get the government $400 billion. And there are even higher tariffs pending in negotiations with China, Mexico, Canada, and the EU. So the new tariff revenues to the U.S. could easily surpass $1 trillion. And we currently know of about 40 trillion of it, 40 billion of it that's coming in. Secondly, in terms of the land sales, the federal government owns 28% of the land in the U.S. with a value of $1.8 trillion. Well, most of it's locked up in conservation areas like national parks and wilderness areas. A lot of it is just plain wilderness, vacant land, sagebrush, well away from any land we want to protect for our heritage. And Trump has called for massive land sales in Utah and Nevada. And like almost half of the federal land in those states will now be auctioned off. And
we're not using it, right?
Right.
So there you go.
And the liberals protect it because they claim that, you got to protect the national parks and the
spotted,
area.
bearded worm.
Yeah, but the big thing is you want to protect the Grand Canyon.
Right.
But they condemn almost the whole state of Arizona in protecting the Grand Canyon. The boundaries are very large, and they use any excuse they can to put land in it. And what Trump is doing is tailoring it narrowly so that it's the area around the park and around the wilderness, not the whole state. And these new revenues, combined with the expected reduction in drug costs for Medicare and Medicaid, will throw off billions not counted in the BBB. Together, these revenue sources open the door to a potential BBB 2.0 that could pay for steep cuts in federal, personal, and corporate income taxes. But you know the bureaucracy. When they get new money, they figure out how to use it.
Right.
And we need to jump on it now and mark that revenue off for an additional tax cut. Trump originally imposed new tariffs to force other countries to lower discriminatory trade barriers against American goods and services. Then his goal morphed into creating incentives for companies to avoid tariffs by moving their manufacturing to the U.S. He calls that onshoring. And now a new vista is opening up, using the new revenues to fund massive cuts in federal taxes. For example, it may be possible to end federal income taxes on those earning less than $150,000 a year. So far, the potential for such a tax cut have remained dreams, but the new revenues materializing make it really possible. Trump should concentrate now on planning on how to use this new money. Otherwise, it may go the way of the post-Cold War peace dividend. You remember that?
No.
When the Cold War ended, everybody said, we're going to be able to cut the defense budget. We're going to be able to get lots of new spending for welfare and other great stuff. And we didn't do it. The defense budget just ate the savings, and it kind of soaked into the soil, and there was more federal spending. We have to make sure that does not happen by seizing these new revenues, metaphorically, and using them to fund a big, bold, beautiful tax cut.
So basically what you're saying is the CBO also is not really doing so well that we shouldn't even listen to them anymore.
Well, the Congressional Budget Office, right. In fact, the Senate really is not now. But we'll talk about that when we come back from the break.
Okay.
The Dick Morris Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. This National Foster Care Month, Marine Toys for Tots is providing hope to children who need it most. Staff Sergeant James Caldwell, who grew up in foster care himself, shares that while handing out gifts at a Toys for Tots distribution event, a little girl looked up at him, reached into her bag, pulled out a stuffed animal and said, "Someone needs to make sure you get a toy too." That simple gesture embodies the heart of Marine Toys for Tots, ensuring every child, including those in foster care, experiences the kindness that can transform their future. Visit toysfortots.org today. The Dick Morris Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Dick Morris and Doug DePiro Show, sponsored by the Patriot Gold Group.
And one more time, Dick, the call-in number, 800-848-9222. 800-848-9222.
The basis of all the discussions about the federal budget and revenues and spending and tax cuts is the estimates by the Congressional Budget Office. That's called CBO, Congressional Budget Office. And it was set up in 1974 when the Democrats in Congress felt that Nixon had appropriated too much power to the presidency, to the executive branch. Arthur Schlesinger wrote a book called The Imperial Presidency, and it set the tone for the legislation that year. And one of the big things that the Congress did, the most important thing it did, was it said, we're not going to sit here and depend on the Office of Management and Budget appointed by the president for our revenue estimates. And we're not going to base our calculations about the deficit or how much a given program will cost or how much revenue a given tax will bring in. We're not going to let the executive branch tell us the answer to that. We're going to have our own experts, our own staff, and they'll do their own evaluating. And that was in 1974. The problem is that the CBO staff is liberal as hell. And they're people who basically deliberately underestimate the cost of new programs and overestimate the revenue, overestimate the budget deficits and the national debt. So Congress ends up being told you got to make big cuts and you can't afford this tax increase, whereas in fact you can. And in 2017, when Trump pushed through, finally at the end of the year, his tax cut, the Congressional Budget Office said, oh, wait a minute, this is going to cost $1.5 trillion. That was before trillion was usually used in budgeting. And that scared the hell out of people. But then it turned out to be totally false. The Laffer curve kicked in by Art Laffer, the economist. And the answer was that the more you cut taxes, the more you increase revenue by increasing economic activity that led to revenue growth. And in fact, when Bill Clinton balanced the federal budget at the end of his term for 4 years, the way he did it was by cutting taxes, not by raising them.
Right.
He cut the capital gains tax, and there was more capital gain, more people sold assets, and the revenues really increased.
Who did that? What president?
A guy named Bill Clinton.
Yeah, so did Ronald Reagan, right?
No, not like we did.
No?
Not like we
I
did.
like this way you say we.
Yeah, well,
we.
I get defensive because I worked on that.
Sorry.
So now it's important that we understand that the CBO is wrong in predicting the 2017 tax cut will cost $7 trillion because economic growth means that probably over 10 years, you have to budget in a 10-year window under the law, there will be probably no costs at all. Probably the economic growth will completely pay for the tax cuts that you're proposing. Now, while this is going on in the Senate, they're looking at the BBB, and the Democrats in the Senate are still debating the SALT deduction, state and local taxes, SALT. And there's a song about that. So, Doug, I originally had You Talk Too Much, the 50s and 60s song.
That was better.
And then I said, no, listen to Doug. You need more modern music on the show.
Yeah, let's Run DMC.
Yeah, so
they did a good thing with Aerosmith. Walk This Way.
So we put Run DMC's music in. The SALT deduction means that you don't pay, you can deduct on your income tax, your federal income taxes, the amount you pay in state and local taxes. State income tax in New York City, the city income tax, the property tax, you can deduct all that on your federal taxes.
And also your county tax, everything, right?
Everything.
State and local.
But then when Trump came into office in 2017, he said this is a deduction that basically favors the high tax states because California and New York have these very high taxes, and Florida and Texas don't even have income taxes. Mm-hmm. So this is a tax cut for Democrats. It's a tax cut only for the blue states and doesn't really help the red states much at all. So part of Trump's tax changes in 2017 was that he capped the deduction on state and local taxes at $10,000. So if you paid $50,000 in income taxes to the state and your property taxes combined, you could only deduct $10,000 of that, and $40,000 you still had to pay taxes on, and that's the current law. So a bunch of congressmen from blue states, led by Mike Lawler from Putnam County and Rockland County in New York, came in and said, no, we want the deduction limit eliminated. We want no cap on SALT. You should be able to deduct your entire payment of taxes.
Well, in his defense, he was speaking for his constituents. In his defense,
well,
he's now voted for it. So
I don't think he really was. We'll talk about that in a second. But you know what that meant was that Hochul and Newsom and Pritzker and all of these liberal governors got a carte blanche to raise taxes because the federal government was going to pay half of it. Most of the high-income people were paying 37 or 40% of their income, their upper bracket in taxes. So they could deduct that off their federal tax, and it was a form of really forced revenue sharing, but only for states that had an income tax. So the rest of the country was subsidizing the high-tax states. And Trump said, that's unfair, I'm going to cut it out. And his critics back in 2017 said, you're only doing this for retribution against states that are Democrat.
There's nothing wrong with that.
So now Lawler and a bunch of other congressmen from Republican states, from Democratic states like New York, came in and said, we will not vote for your tax cut bill, the BBB, unless you restore a full deduction for state and local taxes. And that's been the subject of negotiation and anger and acrimony in the House during this entire process of coming out with a BBB. And finally, they worked out a compromise, which was we would let you deduct up to $40,000. Now it's up to 10. We'll raise that to 40, and we'll give that deduction only to people whose incomes are $500,000 a year or more, very rich people. And that went through, and everybody agreed to that, and it passed, and now it's in the bill going to the Senate. But the senators from the red states are saying, hey, we are not going to go ahead and give Kathy Hochul and Gavin Newsom carte blanche to raise taxes by paying for 40% of the tax cut. We're not going to do that. That's absurd. That's ridiculous. And they're now threatening to take that compromise out of the bill. And Lawler and the others are saying if that happens, we may not go along with it. Now, Lawler says he's just representing his constituents. But I think that's BS. First of all, he's only representing the constituents who make more than $500,000 a year. Everybody under that would keep the deduction that's in the House bill. And secondly, only 9% of the taxpayers actually itemize their deductions. Most of the high-income people do that. So it's a very limited constituency that he's playing to. And the fact that he almost derailed the entire BBB over that, I think was putting the interests of a small group of constituents, basically contributors, over the rest of the country.
Well, then why did he vote for it then?
Because ultimately people raised hell about it. He had a lot of pressure. And Chip Roy, the congressman from Houston,
right,
Texas, who led this effort, ultimately accepted this compromise.
Well, good.
But on Friday, before the bill ultimately passed this week, it was killed in the Budget Committee.
I know.
And it was only by this last-minute negotiation that they pieced it together.
And didn't you do a column on this or something? Well,
I did, and I
also think it swayed a little bit.
I also spoke to Lawler, emailed him.
I remember that.
And told him that I was mad at him.
I know.
And urged him to be flexible. And I don't know if that had any impact, but
so you got to
ultimately
understand,
he did well.
You got to understand Dick Morris is not biased because we like Lawler and we bring him on the show a lot.
Yeah, I think he ought to be the next governor.
And you're right. And Dick still went at him hard, and I said, Dick, take it easy. He said, nope. This is very important, and I'm going to have to give you that, Dick. Very good.
Yeah,
God
I
bless
did.
You did. And it was a good thing.
So the issue is still going on in the Senate, and I think that that really is a mistake.
Yeah, now, this is very important to me, this story.
It's also really fun, the story.
This story?
Yeah.
I don't know about, well, yeah, now it is. The U.S. Department, the U.S. Department of Justice has opened a criminal investigation into former Governor Andrew Cuomo, for allegedly lying to Congress about his decision made during the COVID-19 pandemic while serving as governor. The New York Times first reported that the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington opened the inquiry into Cuomo about a month ago after senior officials in the DOJ demanded an indictment of Mayor Adams for corruption charges be dismissed.
Yeah, the reason that they're being mentioned together is that a lot of people are criticizing Bondi and the DOJ for moving against Cuomo at the same time that they've decided not to move against Eric Adams. And both those guys are running for mayor this year. Cuomo in the primary in June, and Adams and Cuomo in the general election in November of this year. And they're saying, hey, you're meddling in this election. But I believe that it was very important to go after Cuomo for this. The single most outrageous decision I can think of that a governor of New York State has ever made in our 200-plus year history was Andrew Cuomo's decision to take people who had COVID out of the hospitals and put them in nursing homes.
When we had the boat on the Hudson with, I think, 2,000 beds, Jacob Javits Center with about the same, it made me more. He could have put them right on that boat and in the Javits Center, and he decided to go to the nursing. I still can't understand his mindset for that.
And 7,000 people in nursing homes in New York State died as a result of his putting COVID patients in there. And then he was asked, and then he wouldn't release how many died.
That's right.
And then finally he did, and he was testifying before Congress, and he lied about it.
So contempt of Congress
So
now?
This is contempt of Congress. But what he should be indicted for is genocide, really, because he took these 7,000 people and killed them, I believe. Killed them.
Oh, horrible.
By letting COVID patients, putting them into nursing homes, the most vulnerable population there was, absolutely at the height of the pandemic in 2020. And as Doug said, there was an alternative to that, and I think it was outrageous. I don't think he should be elected mayor over this. I think he should go to jail over this.
Absolutely.
And I'm glad that he's being investigated.
They have to have some real solid evidence about this. I mean, it happened, right?
Well, the evidence is simply that he said it didn't happen, and it did happen.
Right.
Yeah. He was saying, "Oh yeah, we did, but I didn't do it. My staff did.
Oh, yeah, well,
my health commissioner
Where
did."
does the buck stop?
Yeah, and in Cuomo's case, where did it start?
Yeah, right.
He was afraid. The reason he did it was he was afraid that hospitals would become so crowded in New York that people with other illnesses and with serious COVID could not be
All
admitted
right.
and could not be treated.
That's understandable. Put him in a ship and in a Javits
Yeah,
Center.
well, that's why we had the ship there. And
I got to look.
That's why we emptied the Javits Center to do it.
Right.
Absolutely.
I got to look into the amount of beds. If I remember my memory, I think the ship had 2,000,
That's about
2,400,
right, yeah.
and Javits had 3,000 or better.
Yeah.
So you're talking 5,000
You're basically
beds.
right.
I
It's
think I'm
something like
close,
that.
yeah. And supposedly, and I don't know this numbers to be true or not, supposedly I remember they only had like less than 50 people in those two areas. They didn't have anyone there.
Oh, they were empty.
They were
Yeah.
empty.
Now, when we come back, we're going to talk about efforts to end woke bias, because there's a lot of news of Trump moving against the woke bias of the media.
The Dick Morris Show. Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
The Dick Morris Show. Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Hey, welcome back to the Dick Morris and Doug DePiro Show, sponsored by the Patriot Gold Group. Let's go to
Pete in New Jersey.
right. Hi, Pete.
Hey, Pete.
How are you? Glad to talk to you.
Good.
I want to ask you a question. I mean, I know the answer, but I want to hear what you would say. If Trump wouldn't have gotten elected, I mean, this country would have been in such dire straits. I mean,
It
I
would.
just don't understand how people could
Thanks
not
for your
vote
call.
him.
Let's tick them off. Inflation would have continued. It would have increased, actually, because the stimulus money that he passed early in Biden's term would now be kicking in even more. U.S. obviously would be weaker throughout the world, and businesses and companies would have stayed away from America. The discrimination, the tariffs would have continued, and the whole woke stuff would have continued. I want to explain something about the woke stuff. One of the big forms, probably the biggest form of censorship in America today, is by advertisers who boycott talk radio, including this station, and television programs of conservatives. So that you compare Fox News with CNN. CNN has much lower audience. They're losing audience hand over fist. But until recently, Fox News made less money in advertising than CNN did, because the left was all subsidizing CNN and penalizing Fox News and penalizing WABC and other conservative outlets. And there was a crowd called Media Matters that was set up during the first Trump administration, or maybe before that, of libs who would scrutinize the content of radio and TV by conservative stations. And it would issue reports on that. And then those reports would go to the ad agencies for the major corporations in the country, the major advertisers. And they would then stay away from advertising on those stations. It was basically an orchestrated censorship of conservative outlets. And it meant that these conservative stations couldn't make the money they wanted to make, and that the liberal stations were being subsidized by a lot of increased ad revenues. Elon Musk has talked a lot about that, and now Trump is targeting Media Matters with an investigation into these practices to determine if they are deliberately skewing the advertising revenues in favor of liberal stations.
Inadvertently, they definitely are. Now,
No, it's verdant.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no.
Pretty verdant.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's what they're going to say. All right.
But that's
all
a
right,
major effort by Trump, and God, it's needed. Ultimately, government censorship is not as effective as getting advertisers not to buy spots on your program.
And on a smaller side of this, after Trump was elected, not to go into if she was elected, after Trump was elected, I talked to a woman this morning about this. After he was elected, people like that want to wear the Trump shirt or want to talk about Trump that wouldn't, because Biden and all the woke people out, which is so horrible, started to talk about it a little more. They lightened up. They were able to feel as though they have a backup.
They're calling it the Trump effect.
Yeah, they have backup now. Number one, there's no more administration that they're going to look into your tax return, look into all your stuff. Now you got conservative people in power. So I think they felt empowered.
Yeah,
conservative people. I think it's small, but I think it's really important, that particular thing.
No, I don't think it's so small, but yeah. Now, the other thing that's going on that Trump is really doing well is he has completely changed the culture at the Justice Department, so that it's the anti-police bias of the DOJ is going away. What went on during the riots of 2020 of the George Floyd period, rather, is that the police departments were sued by the federal government for excess violence, for racism, for police brutality, and so on. And the police departments, the city mayors said, "Hey guys, settle this lawsuit. I don't want to have to pay Washington billions of dollars. You've got to settle this." And the police department said, okay, and they sat down with the DOJ, and they agreed to change their policing practices in many, many ways, and basically let a lot of criminals go free and handcuff the police.
Yeah, that's more like it.
And it was very much it's responsible for the woke policies in criminal justice. Now Trump has completely changed this, and the DOJ has dropped its lawsuits in Louisville and Minneapolis, and dropped those suits. Brenda Lee had some thoughts about that.
Hello, Brenda.
Signings of these pardons. I'm going to ask you a question.
Well, I'll sing it. I'm sorry, so sorry. Please accept my apology.
You're in trouble, Lux.
Should I sing it?
No, absolutely not. I'm going to the next thing.
Yeah.
So the CBS resigns. The president resigns. CBS News president and CEO Wendy McMahon announced Monday she was stepping down in another stunning move for the embattled company. Fox News Digital has confirmed. Her exit follows that of longtime 60 Minutes producer Bill Owens, who quit last month because he felt he lost journalistic independence amid an ongoing legal battle with the President Trump. McMahon's departure comes as CBS parent company Paramount Global is in mediation with Trump's legal team with hopes of settling a $20 billion lawsuit against CBS over its handling of the 60 Minutes interview last year with Vice President Kamala Harris. Trump has accused CBS of aiding his 2024 Democratic opponents through deceptive editing just weeks before the presidential election. Many believe Paramount Global...
Yeah, what that was, as you recall, is that Kamala Harris gave a 60... She was under tremendous pressure to do interviews because she hadn't done them. Nobody knew what she was all about. She'd been vice president. Right. And she went to CBS for 60 Minutes. That is one of the top-rated news show in the country. And she absolutely screwed up the interview. She was word salad. She was totally inarticulate.
And they cut the crap out of it.
So what the CBS did was they not only cut the crap out of it, they pasted some of the things she said in other interviews to make it look like she was coherent in this one.
Right. And
so Trump sued CBS.
Right.
And that suit is now pending.
Yeah, and many of the media observers, CBS News staffers, don't want CBS to settle the suit, which critics have called a hyperbolic reaction to a typical editing decision. Yeah, okay. Last month, Owens abruptly quit saying it had become clear he was no longer able to run the program the way he wanted. Sure, because the Trump administration is going to sue you every time you do what you do.
When we come back, another instance of anti-woke bias, the criticism of Donald Trump for inheriting an airplane from Qatar.
It was a paper plane.
The Dick Morris Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dick Morris Show, entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
The woke segment of the Dick Morris and
Wait,
Doug DePiro
isn't
show.
it always anti-woke?
Well, yeah, but now Trump is really, after the BBB passed the House, Trump could really turn his attention to his other main task, which was to dismantle the woke group that was controlling the U.S.
Does BBB the big badass bill?
Big, beautiful bill.
Oh, it's not
yeah,
the...
right. Okay.
All right. So anyway, ABC's caught again lying about that airplane. It seems ABC News got a little ahead of themselves, suggesting that the president was set to receive a free Boeing 747 airplane from Qatar. It's not Qatar, it's Qatar, but I've been looking it up a lot. Now that it's a headline designed to raise eyebrows, isn't it? But as often the case, the devil, or perhaps the truth, is in the details. President Trump swiftly took to Truth Social to set the record straight, pointing out the significant flaw in their narrative. He made it crystal clear, as The Hill reported, what the actual situation was. From The Hill, quoting President Trump's Truth Social post, everyone, including their lawyers, has been told that ABC must not say that Qatar is giving me a free Boeing 747 airplane, because they are not. This is highly respected country is donating the plane to the United States Air Force Defense Department and not to me. So a generous donation to the U.S. military, a boom for our Air Force, somehow gets twisted into a personal perk for the president. You just can't make this stuff up. It's a classic case of trying to create a scandal where none exist. And it's precisely this kind of misleading spin that erodes the public trust. Fool me once, well, they're trying again. This isn't the first time President Trump had to take on ABC News to task. He even reminded them of a rather expensive lesson they learned previously. This is beautiful. Remember when George Stephanopoulos falsely stated on the air that Trump had been convicted of a sexual assault? That little mistake resulted in a multi-million-dollar settlement paid by ABC, along with the retraction and apology. One would think they would learn to double-check their facts, especially when it involves the president. Hey, Dick, remember... We saw Stephanopoulos come into the apartment. Don't say where. Coming into the apartment with a lot of cash in his pocket, I think.
No, we saw him hanging out in the lobby.
Right, and then the next day we found out what was going on. He goes, I think he was there to see Trump and give him $1 million or $500,000. What was it?
Well, the deal was that Stephanopoulos personally had to pay Trump $1 million.
He ponied up $1 million.
ABC had to pay Trump campaign $10 million.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Love it. So Congress also overturns the California EV mandate. So the Senate approved a resolution Thursday that would revoke California's federal waiver, allowing it and several other Democratic-led states to mandate electric vehicle sales, dealing a blow to activists' efforts to push green energy and fight global warming. I told you this is not going to last, this EV car.
What happened is that years ago, in the last decade, California went way ahead of the rest of the country, or behind, if you will, in passing EV mandates,
right?
Electric vehicle mandates.
Right.
And the rest of the country didn't do it, but they did. And the car company said, well, California is such a large share of our sales that we'll have to institute these policies nationally.
Right.
And we're going to cap our emissions and ultimately eliminate them so that we can all be forced to have electric vehicles.
That's right there. Forced. Right. So I said this for the longest time, that this was not going to last, this electric car. It's going to be around forever, just like any other, new nuance. But it's not going to be, you're going to have 10%, maybe 20% in the years to come. Like, I'm going to buy one just so I have it in my corral of my cars, so I have an electric.
You buy one because you have one of everything.
Yeah, I want one of everything. And the reason why they will be around is because of the mandate that a lot of gas-powered car manufacturers tooled their shops to build these things, and so now they have the ability to make them. So they'll make a couple.
But now the Senate has passed a resolution saying that California can't adopt a standard, and other states can't key their own state laws to whatever California said.
Yeah, this is a significant loss for both California, which passed its EV mandate in 22, and for climate activists who loudly defended the law. After the state approved the law, it sought a federal sign-off. 1970 Clean Air Act allows California to obtain a federal waiver to issue vehicle emissions regulations that are stricter than federal standards. But, here's the other thing. From what I hear from all my genius friends, that there's a lot more pollution going in the air to build these things and the batteries and beating up the earth for the lithium and whatnot for these. So the activists should be glad right now. Just be happy. Ready? Trump wants investigations of fees Harris paid to Springsteen, Beyonce, Oprah, and Bono. I got to tell you, I don't like Bruce Springsteen. I'm going to get a lot of blowback by this, even from our fans. I don't like Springsteen. All this stuff sounds exactly.
But he was born in the USA.
But all this stuff, like, he's got like 4 or 5 songs that are fantastic, great writer, and that's it. Everything else sounds like the same rock and roll, whatever. All right, so Trump is calling for a major investigation into former Vice President Kamala Harris' campaign allegedly paying for celebrity endorsements under the guise of entertainment from Bruce Springsteen, Beyonce, Oprah, and U2's frontman. How much did Kamala Harris pay Bruce Springsteen for his poor performance? I love that, his poor performance during her campaign for president. Trump wrote in the Truth Social thing. Why did he accept that money? If he's such a fan of hers, I love the way he talks. Why did he accept it, right? Isn't that a major and illegal campaign contribution? What about Beyonce, and how much went to Oprah and Bono? That's
in other words, if Harris, if Springsteen and the others had given Trump a campaign contribution, and then they had used that money to pay Springsteen and the others, that would be federally regulated and would be okay. But instead, they dressed it up as a performance fee, and that meant that it did not have to pass muster with the Federal Elections Commission. And that's what Trump wants investigated now. Were they disguising a campaign expenditure as a performance fee?
Dick, I always say it bites them in the butt, the Democrats, from letting illegals into the border and then end up voting conservative. This is biting them, that they went after Trump on everything, and now he's going after. Yeah. And he's not even wasting his time going after this. He's just telling Bondi and all those people, go look into this, and if it's real, they're going to get him.
Yeah,
this is biting them
and they're
in
not,
the butt.
And to pardon the pun, these charges are not trumped up. They're real.
We never use that. I always want to use that. And,
yeah.
We should start using stupid stuff like that.
Now, one of the things that the Justice Department is doing that's changing in the post-woke era under Trump is that it's bringing civil rights complaints against cities that are discriminating against whites. And the Justice Department Civil Rights Division has opened an investigation into Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson.
Good.
After he admitted to enforcing anti-white hiring practices in city government. Assistant Attorney General Harim K. Dillon, a hero of mine, who oversees the Civil Rights Division that has historically been the most radical left division. Now it's moving back and it's suing companies and cities for exclusively hiring black people. Brandon Johnson is being investigated for hiring practice against whites. Mayor Johnson had justified his practices, saying they were aimed at ensuring that our people get a chance to grow their businesses. But the assistant AG for civil rights said Chicago is engaged in a pattern or practice of discrimination.
We'll pick up the rest of the story when we get back.
No, we're finished with that. We'll go on to Iran.
Okay. When we get back.
The Dick Morris Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Anyone can follow. It takes something special to be an original, which is why the 2025 Lincoln Navigator SUV arrives with new ways of surrounding you in luxury, including the ultra-wide 48-inch panoramic display and the multi-sensory Lincoln Rejuvenate experience. A true original never stops evolving. So meet the 2025 Navigator, the original that's all new and better than ever. Learn more at Lincoln.com. Lincoln and Navigator are trademarks of Ford or its affiliates.
The Dick Morris Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Dick Morris and Doug DePiro Show, sponsored by the Patriot Gold Group. This is how Donald Trump negotiates. You're seeing it live in person right now with Iran. Witkoff, his mediator for this, his staff aide guy focusing on negotiating with Iran, said Iran has to stop the enrichment of uranium. In the past deals, Iran has been allowed to continue to enrich uranium for civilian purposes. But you never know what it's for, and once the stuff is enriched, it can be used to power a reactor or a bomb, and you'll never know till it explodes in your backyard.
And then you'll really never know.
And Witkoff is saying none of this BS, zero enrichment, and they're saying if you want to keep the capacity for enrichment alive, you got to export it to another country under our supervision. Well, that's a demand that Iran is resisting and saying, hey, we just intend this for peaceful uses. So Israel has made it very clear that if these talks go nowhere, they are prepared to act. And the U.S. has made it very clear that we will help Israel do that. Lux, you ever thought about that?
Stands on his own. But I was playing golf that day when they struck, when Israel bombed. I didn't realize. Bad BBB.
Now the other half of the way Trump operates is he is not only coercive in the negotiations, but he comes up with ways that are alternatives to coercion, using money to achieve through payoffs and basically incentives, he calls them, the actions that he wants anyway.
And he lets them save face a lot of times. Like, he's going to do that with Putin. He helps, he doesn't always go at them and say, listen, this is what it's going to be. Sometimes he says, if you do this, we'll make sure this will happen, so they can save face.
So he came up with this wonderful idea, which was that he would pay illegal immigrants, $1,000 each if they self-deported. Pick it up, Doug.
Yeah, this is unbelievable. The Department of Homeland Security has conducted its first charter flight for migrants who agree to self-deport after starting a program to give those voluntarily leaving the country $1,000 stipend. The flight took 64 citizens of Colombia and Honduras to their home country. This was a voluntary charter flight, not an ICE enforcement operation, DSS said in a press release, referring to the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. All participants were offered the same benefits as any illegal alien who self-deports using the CBP Home app. They have an app for this. That's the other killer, right? They got an app for everything. My toaster oven, I got to use an app to use it. They received travel assistance, $1,000 stipend, and preserve the possibility that they could one day return to the United States legally. See, right there, that they could return. You see how Trump does that? That's what I'm talking about. The Trump administration earlier this month announced they would begin offering travel assistance as well as the stipend for those registering to self-deport through the CBP Home app. They said migrants would typically be given about 3 weeks to organize their affairs before departing the country. That's pretty interesting.
Well, it's wonderful.
I
And
don't know
increasingly,
if I like that, giving them $1,000.
oh, I love it because that's what we spend much more than
A
that
lot more,
to
right?
pay the cops and the
Yeah.
ICE to go out and bust them and
And they get
hold them in
welfare,
jails
and they get all kinds of stuff,
and,
right.
and they get all kinds of opportunity to contest it in court. And they find a liberal district judge who stops the deportation, saying that somehow or other it's illegal.
Right.
And they lose on appeal. But come on, look at the amount of money we have to spend winning those lawsuits.
And he's got another. My friend's got another thing that I gotta love him for. President Trump, United States citizenship immigration.
Yeah, but let me just spend a second more on this
Okay.
this deport thing. I think that Trump is basically going to increasingly replace forced deportations with voluntary self-deportations.
Interesting, yeah.
And this is really the test case. This was the first time he's done that. And it's so brilliant. And I believe ultimately when it becomes clear to people who are here illegally that they're going to be caught and they're going to be forced out of the country and they'll be left without the ability ever to return, legally or illegally, I guess, they'll instead jump at the $1,000.
Right.
And they'll say, okay, I give up, stop, don't come and bust me, put me on one of those planes. And I believe that a year from now, we'll look back and we'll say, what a brilliant move. Probably 70, 80% of the deportations will have been voluntary.
Wow.
And there will be, and all this liberal stuff that goes on about just snatching kids off the sidewalk and stuff like that
right.
will all now be gone because
separating families.
It'll basically be done voluntarily.
As a matter of fact, a family of a man, a woman, 3 kids, you're talking about $5,000, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Wow. Interesting. All right.
So-
You threw me on that. That's pretty good. So Trump helps states keep illegals off voter rolls. President Trump's United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS, is reforming the agency's systematic alien verification.
This is like Robin Williams,
Oh,
Good
my-
Morning Vietnam. The USCIS is implementing the SAVE.
I know. He was great in that. Good morning, Vietnam. Anyway, the systematic alien verification for entitlements SAVE program, SAVE program, efficiently keeps foreign nationals, including illegal aliens, off state voter rolls. On Thursday, the USCIS officials announced reforms to the nation's SAVE program so that state election officials can enter Social Security numbers to verify a voter registrant's American citizenship
Yeah,
and thus
so-
eligible to vote.
So the USCIS is reforming the SAVE program to permit SSNs to be entered on
The
voter rolls.
VVRA.
Yeah.
Get the phrase. You had to go there. You had to interrupt me for that. For a joke. Everything's a joke with Dick Morris. For years, states have pleaded for tools to help identify and stop aliens from hijacking our elections. USCIS spokesman Matthew Traeger said in a statement, under the leadership of President Trump and Secretary Noem, the USCIS is moving quickly to eliminate voter fraud. We expect further improvements soon and remain committed to restoring trust in American elections. Department of Government Efficiency, here we go again.
Yeah, DOJ did this, yeah.
Officials said in April they had discovered thousands of foreign nationals on only a handful of state voter rolls and suggested the issue could be more widespread. Specifically, the reforms partners, USCIS and the Social Security Administration, together so that cases to verify American citizenship can be created using the Social Security number rather than an alien number, typically only held by the Department of Homeland Security, DHS. The reforms will also allow state and local election officials to submit several American citizenship verification cases at once rather than one at a time.
I mean,
that
wow.
was a lot, Dick. That was
But
a lot.
wow, this is incredible. It basically will eliminate large
A lot
parts
of
of voter
fraud.
fraud.
Yeah.
There'll never be another 2020 election because now with a simple social security number, you can tell if the guy in front of you who wants to vote is legal or illegal.
Right, and he would have to...
And that has not existed before. Instead, you had to have a very long process and ask the feds to check everybody out one at a time. And the result was there was no effective way of stopping foreigners from voting in elections.
So remember the Congress people that went into that ICE facility? I think it was last week. Well, here we go. LaMonica, is it MacIver? Is that how you say your name? It's MacIver, right? LaMonica MacIver, Jersey Democrat, was charged with assaulting, resisting, and impeding law enforcement officers during a riot at Delaney Hall, an ICE detention facility in Newark. Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem and acting U.S. Attorney for the District of Jersey, Alina Habba, is it Habba or Abba? Doesn't matter.
When she sings, it's ABBA.
Because it's Habba, so it could be Abba. But anyway, Alina Habba revealed that MacIver was being charged. Noem noted that no one is above the law. The announcements of the charges against MacIver come after Reps MacIver, Bonnie Watson, Coleman, Robert Menendez, and Newark Mayor Ross Baraka showed up at Delaney Hall to conduct federal oversight of federal oversight of the facility, and allegedly stormed and trespassed. Baraka ended up being arrested for alleged criminal trespass. After a thorough review of the video footage of Delaney Hall and a full investigation from HSI, the U.S. Attorney for the District of Jersey had made determination to charge Congresswoman LaMonica MacIver for assaulting, resisting, and impeding law enforcement officers. Good for them.
Yeah.
Good for them.
And then the flip side of the voluntary deportation
is this. The Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court on Monday lifted a lower court's block on President Trump's order to revoke protected status for hundreds of thousands of migrants living in the U.S. The High Court allowed the Trump administration to strip approximately 350,000 Venezuelans currently in the U.S. of their protected status.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye. Oh, little. 8-1 Supreme Court will allow the Trump administration, 8-1 Supreme Court will allow the Trump administration to rescind Biden-era temporary deportation protections for Venezuelan migrants while the policy is challenged in court. Jackson's the only noted dissent. In March, a federal judge issued a stay on Trump's order to revoke temporary restricted status, TPS, for Venezuelans who arrived to the U.S. on Biden's parole program. Talk about his parole program.
Well, the concept was that Biden said, hey, when people are fleeing oppression or at risk of being killed or tortured, we have got to let them into the U.S. on an expedited basis. The political reason for this was he didn't like the idea of news programs showing migrants crossing the border easily and at will. So he said, okay, we won't cross the border. What we'll do is we'll put them on a plane and fly them at taxpayer expense to someplace in the U.S.
We'll fly over the border.
Yeah, and then they're not legal. They weren't legal originally, but we'll give them temporary parole, temporary protected status. And they gave 500,000 Venezuelans this status. And then and in March, Trump tried to stop that, and the federal district court said you can't. And now the Supreme Court has reversed them and said, yes, you can.
Bye-bye. Okay, bye-bye.
So when we get back, we'll talk about Biden's prostate cancer.
The Dick Morris Show. Entertaining and informative. On the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dick Morris Show. Entertaining and informative. On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Dick Morris, Doug DePiro Show, sponsored by the Patriot Gold Group. So it was released this week that Biden has prostate cancer and that it has spread to his bones, which meant it's been there for a while. So the question is, how has Biden's cancer been able to fly under the radar when he was getting the highest level of health care in the world? A urologist with the VA said, what I would typically see in the VA hospital where a patient hasn't had medical attention in 10 years presents to an emergency room with bone pain, and they find it's metastatic prostate cancer. But in the modern age of medicine, especially the fact that he was a former president, he had intensive state-of-the-art care where we can see prostate cancer 10 years in the past.
Right.
So it's very unusual to hear that someone had prostate cancer and was undiagnosed when they're getting these intensive treatments.
Yeah, another cover-up.
Trump put it more sharply in a post on X. What I want to know is, how did Dr. Jill Biden, his wife, miss stage 5 metastatic cancer? Or is this just another cover-up?
Of course it is.
And the former White House doctor, who's a congressman, Ronnie Jackson, expressed his skepticism that the development of Biden's cancer was something that occurred solely since he left office last January.
And even another doctor on the Morning Joe show said Mr. Biden likely had the cancer when he took the oath of office in 2021.
Congressman Jackson, again, the former White House physician, who's now a congressman, said this is either medical malpractice or, like you said, this is yet another medical cover-up. I find it absolutely, just like you do, inconceivable that this man has prostate cancer just after leaving the White House. He was at the White House for 4 years. He had access to world-class health care for 4 years, and there's absolutely no excuse that Dr. O'Connor, his personal physicians, and the predecessor of Congressman Jackson. And I just want to clarify one thing. The White House Medical Unit is a fantastic medical unit, and they do everything they're supposed to. So the issue now is, was there a cover-up?
Of course.
Obviously there was. And was Jill Biden involved in that cover-up?
Jill, the wife.
Yeah. And obviously she was. And this is one of the most important scandals involving the wife of a president.
Horrible.
Dave Carney, a Republican consultant, said this will shoot to hell the Democratic Party's credibility for a generation. Does anybody now believe what Enron says? This is a catastrophic ethical line that they've crossed. Even their biggest offenders in the media have turned on them. No one believes accounting from post-Enron collapse, and no one's going to believe what the Democrats say with this cancer diagnosis. And
but the Democrats don't care. In a month from now, they would say, that was wrong, that was false.
The precedent you're thinking of here is that in 1919, at the end of World War I, President Woodrow Wilson did a speaking tour of the country to sell the League of Nations and try to get Senate ratification.
Right.
He failed, but in the course of the tour in St. Louis, he had a stroke, and the stroke left him incapacitated for the last 2 years of his presidency. He literally could not really speak, couldn't really move.
I didn't know this.
And the president of the United States effectively was his wife, Edith Wilson, and she ran the country.
Was he hidden by this? Like he didn't?
No, everybody knew he had the stroke, but they let his wife run things. She would decide who he could see, when he could see them, how long he could talk, what issues he would do. And for 2 years, this woman was basically the president.
Plus, there wasn't big media, TV and radio like
there was a lot,
now, but not like
there was
now.
a lot. And this may be a situation very much like that.
This reminds me of whether it's Michael Jackson or Elvis, where the doctor said, "Oh, you're fine. Here, take this, take that." They pretty much just didn't care what he was thinking, Biden, because he was already messed up in the head. And they were like, "Oh yeah, everything's fine. Don't worry about it."
Yeah, I think they cared, Doug. I think the problem was
they cared more about their power.
Yeah, the problem was they didn't want him thrown out of office.
Right.
And there's a thing called the vice president who can step in when the president is dying.
Could you imagine?
and the aides to the president and the power structure based the cabinet did not want a new president. And they kept Biden going, and they kept Woodrow Wilson going, using their wives to effectively govern.
Like literally a puppet.
Yeah.
Literally, he was on a stick or on a string.
Exactly.
Literally, it was unbelievable.
It is. And particularly because we have the 25th Amendment now in the Constitution that says how you're supposed to act when the president is incapacitated. And there's a whole amendment that lays out a whole procedure for this.
Well, first of all...
And was sitting right there, and they didn't want to use it.
First of all, when they were going to indict him or whatever they were doing, and his doctor or whoever did the... was it a prosecutor that says, oh, he's not fit for trial?
Yeah, well, this was
there.
This was the documents
what was
case.
That? Yeah, what was... Oh,
where
right.
Biden held documents illegally, just like they accused Trump of doing.
Right.
And they searched his home and his summer home, and they found these documents, and Biden couldn't account for why they were there. And they appointed a special prosecutor named Hur, H-U-R.
Right.
And he investigated, and he came back and he said, yeah, this guy probably did commit a crime and probably should be prosecuted and maybe impeached for this. But come on, I've examined him. He's too senile to stand trial.
So let him go back to the White House and deal with that.
The jury is essentially going to say he's an old man who forgot everything. So don't prosecute.
But let him stay as president.
And then they wouldn't release the Democrats wouldn't release the tape of how incoherent Biden sounded. And Trump had to sue on that. And when Trump took office, he released the tape just last week.
Oh, I don't remember
that. And everybody saw how incompetent Biden was at that point. Incoherent, incompetent, unable to function. And now it turns out he also had prostate cancer. So, I mean, come on, how much do you have to do before you realize that you need to invoke the 25th Amendment?
Are there any legal ramifications to this or no?
Well, there may be against Joe Biden for this.
What would be what?
But, well, that she obstructed justice. But the more serious question here is how do you invoke the 25th Amendment? Right now you need a majority of the cabinet, all appointed by the president, to say the president can't govern anymore. He's incapacitated. And that's obviously baloney. They're not going to do it. And party discipline is such that they won't let him do it. So there is no effective 25th Amendment anymore to stop somebody who's totally incapable from serving as president. Unbelievable.
That's unbelievable.
When we come back, we can talk about the economy and the enormous strides Trump has made.
Well, I think we're early.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah, remember, we had a technical difficulty.
222.
Okay, so 22. Trump saves U.S. steel. Local steel workers, community leaders, and economic experts say President Trump's announcement Friday that a deal was struck between the U.S. Steel and Nippon Steel will go down in American history as the most enduring economic, big, beautiful deal the 47th president has made. It's a deal robustly supported by the rank-and-file steelworkers from 3 plants that make up the Mon Valley Works. The deal is believed to reverse the decline of steel that began under President Jimmy Carter in the 70s. This is huge for Western Pennsylvania workers, families, communities, and, of course, the U.S. Steel family, said the plant manager, Don German. I'm so happy for those employees, both management and union, that have just started their careers at U.S. Steel. This is a huge weight lifted and a huge opportunity to keep steel in the Steel City, German said. A person familiar with the deal said the benefits include $14 billion in capital investment projects at U.S. Steel. With approximately $11 billion of the $14 billion invested by 2028. These are investments that U.S. Steel could not make as a standalone company. Those new capital investments include $2.2 billion to revitalize the only remaining blast furnace mill in Pittsburgh, $200 million for a new R&D center in Pennsylvania to bring world-leading technology to the U.S. Steel. $1 billion invested by 2028 in new greenfield steel mill. This is a lot. And $3.1 billion in Indiana to transform the historic Gary Works mill. There will also be a $3 billion investment in Arkansas plant, including $1.8 billion for advanced electrical steel production for power grid transformers, $800 million in Minnesota to enhance iron ore mining, and that's a lot of money, man, $500 million in Alabama for tubular upgrades to supply American oil and gas dominance.
That's 100,000 jobs for Pennsylvania,
wow.
The key state in the election. And this is really Trump negotiating, because what happened is that Nippon Steel and U.S. Steel...
Nippon is Japanese, correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Reached
Oh, whatever. Are they here, though, or are they...
And U.S. Steel is American, Doug.
No, I think it's the other way around. It's us steel.
Yeah, it's a steel.
Weisenheimer. Either like my grandmother would say, you're Weisenheimer.
It's a steel.
It's a steel.
So Nippon made a deal with U.S. Steel to take it over. And Trump said, hey, wait a minute, I'm not going to approve that. I'm not going to have the main steel company in the United States being owned by Japan. I know he likes Japan a lot these days and all, but I'm not going to go ahead and do it.
I think he just likes sushi.
And what Trump was doing really is holding up Nippon Steel and Japan for saying you can do this only if you really invest a lot of money in U.S. steel production. And they did. It's a fabulous deal. It's amazing that Trump did it. And he deserves to have carried Pennsylvania because of this. Now, while this is happening, the latest poll shows that by Harvard-Harris, which is the best polling company, shows that 51% say the economy is strong, the first time in 4 years. Let's hear it.
We're winning, baby. We're winning.
As 51% rated the economy is strong. And the proportion of Americans saying inflation is the main problem is down by 5 points. Now, for the first time since 2021, 35% say their personal financial situation has improved, a rise of 5 points. Another Insider Advantage poll shows that Trump's job approval has surged to 55% approve, while only 44% disapprove. Insider Advantage pollster Matt Towery writes, other pollsters who accurately polled election cycles where Trump's name appeared on the ballot have been showing his approval ratings moving into the 50% range. This is absolutely incredible. And when you see that Trump has been underwater in approval, really, ever since he
What was his lowest on approval?
Oh, I don't know.
38? He wasn't.
Yeah, in that range.
Right.
Unbelievable.
It's unbelievable.
Meantime, in real elections, the far-left radical mayor lost a primary in Pittsburgh.
Allegheny County Controller Corey O'Connor pulled off a rare political feat Tuesday night, unseating incumbent Mayor Ed Gainey. He didn't gain. Ed Gainey in an intense competitive primary that at times appeared to be a proxy for the national battles between the progressive and the moderate wings of the weakened Democratic Party. Mr. O'Connor received nearly 53% of the votes, while Mr. Gainey tallied about 47%, with all but 2 precincts in the city reporting as of early Wednesday morning.
So the wreckage of the Democratic Party continues.
Yeah, and it's going to keep going, hopefully.
Trump had a rare opportunity to raise the issue of anti-white bigotry to a new level. He met on Wednesday with South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, Ramaphosa, and he did the same thing with Ramaphosa, president of South Africa, that he did with Zelensky. He brought him into the White House for an Oval Office meeting, and then he ambushed
them.
And the claim was that he's been advocating violence against the white population of the country. After Ramaphosa attempted to defend his plans, Trump wheeled in a TV footage showing rally, and the footage included a leader saying, "Kill the Boer," and advocating explicit racial violence. South Africa was originally colonized by Britain, and starting in the late 19th century. Then in 1900, the Boer, lots of Dutchmen, white Dutch immigrants, moved into South Africa, and 1900 wanted to be independent and run the country and kick the British out. And that led to the Boer War, BOER. And that was the war, by the way, where Winston Churchill was captured and escaped. And his writing about that was really what brought him to the attention of the English public. These people are saying, the people are officials, and they're saying that kill the white farmer and take their land. And I have other friends in South Africa, people that left, one in particular who says you can't go there. They want to take your land, and they kill you. It's okay to do that now, and we have to stop it. Wow. If you're a farmer in South Africa, you are 3 times more likely to be murdered than a policeman. Wow. And a policeman twice as likely to be murdered or killed than a civilian, which means the most dangerous job in South Africa is being a farmer. And Trump is now exposing this and threw it right in the face of the president of South Africa. When Mandela was released from prison and was elected president of South Africa, he basically took a racial time bomb that everybody was afraid would explode into anti-white killings, and he defused it by talking about peace and reconciliation. Since Mandela died, that has gone to hell, and the South African government, a black government, has absolutely been conducting genocide against the Dutch farmers. Now, the Dutch farmers themselves were horribly racist, locked up Mandela, and basically pushed the whole apartheid policy. The British, who were nominally the former colonial power, basically were powerless, and the Dutch Boers led the racism. Mandela solved the racism and tried to have a peace and reconciliation, and that went up in smoke now, and they're killing white farmers, and Trump is really taking action about that.
Wow, that's something.
When we come back, good news. Kathy Hochul dropped 10 points in popularity.
Not for her.
When we come back.
The Dick Morris Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
This episode is brought to you by Temptations Cat Treats. Your cat will come running for the perfectly irresistible Temptations Creamy Puree and Temptations Lickable Spoon Cat Treats. The best time to feed lickable cat treats to your cat is anytime. Feed by hand for a playful moment, in a bowl for a creamy treat, or as a topper to make mealtime fun. Visit TemptationsTreats.com to learn more.
Smartwater Alkaline with antioxidant. 9.5 plus pH, now in cans.
Refreshing.
Made for every way you move.
Should I run a marathon?
Let's start with finishing that water. Smartwater Alkaline with antioxidant, now in a sleek can. For those with a taste for taste. Grab yours today.
This episode is brought to you by Cadillac. Cadillac certified service technicians are factory trained to fit your vehicle with the tires specifically developed for it. And with our tire price match guarantee, you get the best fit for the best deal. Let us do the work. Available on select eligible tire brands at participating dealers only. Offer ends 12/31/2025. Terms apply. See dealer for complete details. Visit Cadillac.com/service to learn more.
Shopping is hard, right? But I found a better way. Stitch Fix online personal styling makes it easy. I just give my stylist my size, style, and budget preferences. I order boxes when I want and how I want. No subscription required. And he sends just for me pieces, plus outfit recommendations and styling tips. I keep what works and send back the rest. It's so easy. Make style easy. Get started today at StitchFix.com/Spotify. That's StitchFix.com/Spotify.
The Dick Morris Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Yeah, so Hochul drops 10 points. 2/3 don't want her to go again. A third are only voters that really are looking for her to be the governor again. The number marked a 10-point slide from last month when 39% backed the governor for re-election. 48% said they wanted someone else. Hochul announced last July that she's running for re-election. Yeah, that's because
so
they're morons.
Hochul is an endangered species.
Well, I think the people that don't want Hochul want Cuomo. That's what that's about, I think.
Well, maybe.
Why would they, whatever.
Well, you can't bring Cuomo back. Anyway.
I know.
Very interesting. A federal judge struck down mandatory paid leave for abortions.
Right.
There was a struck down regulations requiring U.S. employers to provide workers with time off and other accommodations for abortions. Lux? A divided Supreme Court killed the Oklahoma Religious Charter School. A 4-4 vote. Kobe Barrett recused herself. So the court was stuck with only 8 judges, and by 4-4, they deadlocked on whether openly religious schools are entitled under the Constitution to receive public money through state charter school programs. And that left in place a lower court ruling in Oklahoma denying public funding in what would have been the nation's first religious public charter school. But the deadlock creates no precedent. And when Coney Barrett is back on tap, I hope she votes with the conservative.
And it will go back to the Supreme Court then.
Well, there'll be some other state that'll try that. The whole idea here is that it is illegal for the federal government to give aid to parochial schools. And what they've been doing for decades now is giving the aid under other guises. We're funding their school lunch programs. We're funding their pupil transportation. We're not giving them money. This is just funding their transportation. And the Oklahoma finally said, to hell with this. We're actually going to give money to parochial schools. And the court ruled that you can't. Now, Sandra has a question about China, and we're going to talk about China now. Hi, Sandra.
Hi, Sandra.
Oh, good afternoon. Happy Memorial Day.
Same to
yes,
you.
Thank you. I was reading in the Epic Times that they're going through something in the past 5 months, and I'm wondering if it's related to anything with the tariffs. I don't think so, but what's happening is tens of thousands of people. Yes, in China, in all the provinces and all the municipalities, all these people who normally get paid are not getting paid for their work. It's happening in the schools. It's happening in construction companies, in electrical companies, all sorts of things. And some of the companies are closing and leaving without paying the people.
Let me amplify Sandra's point. The Chinese century is over. Lux?
It's Over by Roy Orbison.
The Chinese century is over of the past 20 years, saying that China would soon overtake the U.S. as the world's dominant superpower. China is now facing twin perpetual headwinds and has no realistic options for countering them. Start with the demographics. What was for many previous decades China's ultimate advantage, its never-ending supply of working-age laborers, peaked at almost exactly 1 billion people in 2010. The next census, 2020, revealed for the first time that the working-age cohort had shrunk, decreasing by more than 30 million. Every age-related trend in China is going in the wrong direction. The nation's median age, once well below the Western world's, is now older than America's, and further north with every passing year. Deaths outnumbered births in 22 for the first time since 1961. The fertility rate, which must be at 2.1 per adult woman to maintain steady population, has slipped to 1.1, a fact made worse by the fact that unlike virtually any other country on the planet, China does not have a relatively even gender split in its adult population because of their one-child policy.
Right.
And women in surveys in China have indicated a lower interest in having children than ever before. In Japan, economic stagnation produced a period that's been called the lost decade that actually was about 30 years long. That stagnation eventually persisted so long that some began to refer to it as the lost generation. China has an even more ominous buzz phrase that's become popular online, the last generation. Much has been made of the difficulties China will face in attempting to manage a rapidly shrinking workforce against a rapidly growing retirement age population. But the issue may actually be preferable to what's likely to happen afterwards, or perhaps sooner, if China's older population doesn't wind up living long as expected. Even these estimates are optimistic. Some say that China will drop 75% of its population to 310 million by the end of the century.
75%?
Yep.
Wow.
The U.S. would be larger than China by 2100. If you think China has ghost cities now, imagine the vast nation with barely one-third of the population it has today. What will happen to property values in the country, where between 50 and 70% of the people have disappeared? What will happen to tourism, to retail? So many articles have been written about what happens when a modern society grows too old, as has been happening in Japan and Germany. But how many have been written about what happens when a majority of the society vanishes altogether? To make matters worse, it seems possible that all these numbers rely on official Chinese statistics, and the government is lying. The population loss is even more than that.
Wow.
So keep that in mind when we talk about China militarily, we talk about Taiwan. We're talking about a country in the throes, not just of a crisis, but of death throes. And China will not survive because it's about to lose over half of its population. Unbelievable.
Well, Gates and Soros won't be happy because they want to do away with people and they're going to lose business.
Okay, when we come back, we'll talk about that Biden knew about the risks of the COVID vaccine. Sponsored by the Patriot Gold Group. Well,
Biden knew of the COVID vaccine risk. Senator Ron Johnson says federal health officials delayed warning the public about adverse side effects of the COVID shot. Starting in February 2021, federal health agencies have been alerted to large reports of myocarditis in young people who got the Pfizer shots, but waited until late June to change vaccine labels to reflect the warning. The Biden administration opted to withhold issuing a formal warning to the public for months. The myocarditis is inflammation of the heart muscle. That's what happened from that vaccine.
So this is very political. The COVID started in 2020, and Trump went berserk making sure that we developed a vaccine. Mm-hmm. And he actually told the drug companies, you develop a vaccine and we'll commit to pay you $100 million to buy the vaccine,
right,
even though you haven't developed it yet.
Warp speed, right?
Warp speed. Mm-hmm. And it worked fantastically. It was next to the Manhattan Project for the atomic bomb, was probably the most efficient and effective federal response to a disaster, and probably the most important thing Trump did. But in 2021, the first year under Biden, it turns out that the vaccine was rushed so much that it was causing a lot of heart problems in people. And that's the stuff Bobby Kennedy talked about.
Right.
And it turns
myocarditis.
And it turns out, but it took until June, February to June, before the Biden administration to issue a warning about that.
Horrible.
So all these people got heart disease. And until this came out, there had been a lot of putting down the people for talking about the side effects of the vaccine. But, boy, it's very clear now.
Unbelievable. Someone should go to jail. Anyway, Trump bars Harvard from enrolling foreign students. The Trump administration told Harvard University on Thursday it no longer would be allowed to enroll international students, a significant escalation in President Trump's war against the university. Kristi Noem, the head of the Department of Homeland Security, ordered Harvard to be taken off the Student and Exchange Visitor Program certification, along with not allowing new foreign students to DHS said the thousands of current foreign-born students at Harvard must transfer or lose their legal status.
And this is obviously will spread to the other colleges.
Right.
And a third of Harvard's revenue comes, 27% of Harvard's student body comes from abroad. And since much of the domestic population of Harvard is on scholarships,
right,
it's a very large portion of their revenues.
They want Harvard to be accountable for fostering violence, anti-Semitism,
right,
and coordinating with the Chinese Communist Party on its campus. That's what it's all about. They're going at it. They're not going to do it.
Now, a district court has blocked the action on Harvard. In fact, they did it the day after Trump announced it.
Right.
So Harvard is taking this very seriously. But that'll be reversed on appeal. The fact that the president's power over this is absolute. Now, another byproduct of COVID is that apparently school attendance in public schools has absolutely crashed. Kids have stopped going to school, but they're not stopped being graduated.
Wait a minute.
In California, 100,000 kids graduated last year, despite having been truants for much of the year, much of their time.
Why, they just want the government
They want
subsidy.
the government subsidy,
Yeah,
but they don't want to admit that they're not in school.
Oh, that's horrible.
That's compounded by the fact that they're not there because the habit of going to school was broken under the Biden years by the phony argument that we needed to protect students against COVID. In fact, the kids were not liable. There was very little chance of an epidemic of kids. The population that got
where
this
was this again?
well, nationally,
California?
but this is
So
California.
there's a bunch of dunderheads walking around. Do.
Yeah, but the point is that they have completely demeaned and diminished the value of a high school degree. And they did this so that they could save the teachers' union. Teachers didn't want to catch COVID. They were at risk. The students weren't. So for 2 years, they closed schools, and kids got out of the habit of going to school.
Sure.
And after the schools were reopened, they didn't show up. And it's just a huge national disaster.
It is.
And on top of this, California parents are now pulling their kids out of school. Lux number 38. There are 20% fewer first graders than 12th graders in California. Normally it's the other way. They drop out of school.
Right.
But now they're simply not going to school.
Now, the parents are not letting them
California public school enrollment has declined for the 7th straight year, and the number of students from low-income and homeless families has increased as many school districts throughout the state face financial pressure to downsize. Right now, there are 500,000 12th grade students, but only 400,000 first grade students, more than a 20% decrease. The teachers' unions have completely destroyed public education, and this is a crucial step in that.
And now talking about kids having a problem, that grave risk. This is our guy Kennedy. President Trump's Make America Healthy Again Commission released its anticipated report assessing chronic diseases that have gripped U.S. youths in recent years, pinning blame for a spike in childhood issues on a host of variables stretching from ingesting foods with added chemicals to an increase in prescribing pharmaceuticals to young kids. After a century of costly and ineffective approaches, the federal government will lead a coordinated transformation of our food, health, and scientific systems, the report released Thursday and reviewed by Fox Digital.
The report's findings indicate teenage depression nearly doubled in the last 10 years. More than 1 in 5 children over the age of 6 are considered obese, and 1 in 30 children are diagnosed with autism by age 8. And childhood cancer has spiked by 40% since 1975. Over 40% of the roughly 73 kids under 17 in the U.S. have at least one chronic health condition, such as asthma, allergies, obesity, autoimmune diseases, and behavioral disorders. So this is HHS, with Kennedy really exposing this in the country. While this is going on, Trump has turned up the heat on Apple and the EU on trade. The European Union has been very bad in its negotiations with Trump and dragging him out. And Trump said, come on, I won't put up with this anymore. In 9 days, I'm imposing a 50% tariff on the EU. And he said, I long ago informed Tom Cook of Apple that I expect their iPhones to be made in the United States if they're sold in the United States. He said the European Union was formed for the primary purpose of taking advantage of the U.S. on trade. Our discussions with them are going nowhere. Therefore, I'm recommending a straight 50% tariff on the EU, and starting January 1st. It's like June 1st.
Well,
so,
Dick Morris, it's been an honor to be here with you.
Yeah, it's been, we had to rush at the end.
And we have so much more when we get back. But when we get back, that's going to be next week.
Well, thank you, Doug.
Bye-bye, little.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
No. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
No. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to The Dick Morris Show. You can hear The Dick Morris Show Sundays at noon. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?
Hello, folks. Larry Kudlow here. Pay attention, because China is leading the largest anti-American alliance since World War II. One that's already dumped U.S. bonds, grabbed 43 million acres of our farmland, and is plotting to dethrone the dollar. That's why IRA and 401k savers are protecting their savings with gold. Please go to freegoldguide.com/Kudlow or just call 800-621-3908 for your free gold guide on how to protect your wealth with gold 100% tax-free.